can't remember who wrote it. Van Gogh, was it?
I always say Van Vogt,
Van Vogt? I don't
which
even know
may
how
not
to...
be right.
Van Gogh? Yeah, A.E. Van Gogh. Gogh? I don't know. Anyway, welcome to Telltale, where I can't remember what we just read. So we're going to actually talk about the short story Asylum by A.E. Van Vogt?
Something like that.
Or something like that. V-O-G-T.
It's one of those things where I've always seen it in print. I've never heard it said.
Yeah, that's kind of how I am too. This is my first time ever hearing of this author. So do you have any tidbits of information
Oh, yes.
about this author? I've never heard of them.
Van Vogt burst onto the scene with a short story called Black Destroyer in the July 1939 issue of Astounding Stories, which had a couple of other really excellent stories. And that issue of Astounding is generally considered, mainly because of Van Vogt's story, to be the launching point for the golden age of science fiction.
Ooh.
That was the start with that issue.
It was the beginning.
Yes.
The genesis, if you will.
Right.
Very nice.
And that's why Isaac Asimov, when he did this series of the great science fiction stories, he started with 1939.
Woo.
Because that's officially the first year of the golden age of science fiction. And Van Vogt very quickly rose to be one of the favorite, because Astounding Stories would take a reader poll of what was their favorite story from each issue, so everything would be ranked.
Yeah.
Van Vogt was consistently up near the top. Van Vogt, Heinlein, and L. Ron Hubbard.
Oh, of course.
Were the top three writers through the 1940s.
Interesting.
So he was very popular, and deservingly so. His stories are well written. Even his very first published story, Black Destroyer, is very well written. Got some good characterization, some really good situations. It's mostly space opera, but he has the ideas that Campbell was looking for Astounding, and just is a very engaging author. However, along with Campbell and L. Ron Hubbard in the 1950s, when Hubbard wrote Dianetics, Campbell and Van Vogt got involved with that, and while Campbell kept going as editor of Astounding, Van Vogt, he did publish his classic stories from the 40s through the 1950s, but arguably his fiction after that was not as engaging.
Wasn't as on par.
Until the 1970s, some of the reviews of the books he wrote then were just really bad.
Brutal. Brutal honesty.
Yeah. But he
right.
had a great start, and he was one of the top science fiction writers of the 1940s.
So, yeah, I can see why.
And so in 1942, he published Asylum, which I have in the Great Science Fiction Stories #4.
And I have in Adventures in Space and Time, edited by Raymond Jane Healy and J. Francis McComas. So, this is a huge book. Like I said in the previous video, do not put this in a purse. My shoulders are paying for it.
Well, wait a minute. It's a good weapon.
I mean, yes, if you need to weaponize your purse.
You're like... Somebody acting up, pull that book up, whack them behind the head.
You don't even have to. Just get a good swing on your purse and just fling it around your head a little. Like, I've got this nice, I'd rather be a unicorn bag, where it's just nice big for carrying my books in. You could just whip that sucker. Yeah. Or if you were like me when I was in college, our campus was in the main migratory pattern for like all the geese in Illinois.
Oh no.
So sometimes to get to class, you had to whack a few geese to get there because they'll
watch where you step.
They will, and they'll charge you. Like they will come after you. They'll chase you. They've got like multiple rows of teeth. They're terrifying. Canadian geese are terrifying. Unlike Canadians, who are delightful. Take after your human counterparts. Anyway.
Okay. So I'll give the synopsis to you because I read this in like 1980 and I can't remember it very well.
So, space vampires. Yeah. This is like the first space vampire story ever.
It's also, I also was reading where it's one of the first science fiction stories to postulate the idea of a larger galactic empire that is
Yes.
sheltering Earth from
Yes.
the
Because it's an
rest of the galaxy.
experiment. So what is interesting is these two vampires are in space trying to find a new planet to feed on because they've been shunned by the Galactic Empire as a species. At first, they were seen as kind of like the AIDS pandemic, where it was just an unfortunate accident that they all became vampires the way they did.
Hmm.
But over time, they started becoming less and less empathic people and more, I guess, really apathetic. They're just really like narcissistic, apathetic, kind of we're superior because we're immortal and blah 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 kind of stuff. So they end up becoming a problem.
Sucked.
Yeah, they all sucked, literally. They're energy vampires, no less.
Yes.
Haha. But yeah, so basically they suck the life force out of people. All the life force, like blood, everything, soul, all of it. They just take it all. So they end up going to Earth because it's not really super looked in on a lot by the Galactic Empire because it's still in its early phases.
Mm-hmm.
So they commit a weird crime of energy sucking this couple they happen to see on the street, and then they go into hiding to see if they can kind of build a little empire and, of their own and kind of like have the humans be their main food supply, so to speak. Mm-hmm. So a lot of this revolves around one of the reporters who happened to come at the scene of the crime and was one of like the top reporters in the area where this happened. He gets dragged into all this because he's doing a lot of the journalistic research to try and figure out what happened to this couple who ended up being energy sucked by these vampires. And of course, he asks a lot of weird questions and hard questions and suspicious questions, and next thing you know, he's encountering, entirely unprepared, these vampires. And kind of gets sucked into doing their bidding because he gets hypnotized and all this stuff. But there's a really interesting twist, and I think that's where I'm going to stop.
Okay.
Because, yeah, it's a really good twist involving this reporter.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, it was really good. This was actually probably the longest short story we read this month. It's more of a novella.
It's classified as a novella.
Yeah, it's got about 10 parts to it. But I read it in about an hour. I'm a pretty fast reader, though. So yeah, I think
fast.
Yeah, probably 2 hours.
Okay.
Or so for an average reader or a slower reader. So it was a really good read. I loved the twist in it. I wish I could talk to you about it. It was so well done. I had to reread most of that section because I was just like, what? What? Wait a minute. Let me go back and reread this again. Just to make sure I didn't miss anything. And of course, it was phenomenal. I was really, really pleased with it. I was really pleased with how it ended. I just absolutely loved the characterization. It was kind of like semi-comedic in a lot of respects, because this reporter is just like your average Joe kind of guy, where he's just like, fuck.
Yeah, and I like the vampires. They're like, he's pointing guns at them, and they're like, whatever.
Yeah, they're just like,
you're gonna die in a minute. So
yeah, shake it off.
No big deal.
I'll play with you later, kind of things. Yeah. There was a little bit of a like seduction thing in there that you kind of like with vampires, because that's a very like classic vampiric trope. But yeah, it was a really, really good read. I enjoyed it a lot. I thought the world building wasn't super detailed like I usually like, but the story was compelling enough that I didn't need all those details. I think the most detailed part was when they ended up on this wild goose chase onto this meteorite where so-and-so lived. Yeah. Some scientist that they were trying to get in touch with to kind of figure out what the state of the Galactic Empire's involvement in Earth was and all that kind of stuff, and maybe some like background secret stuff. That was probably the most world building they had done in the whole thing. That and one of the hotels was really detailed as well, which was really cool. I liked that a lot. But for the most part, it was a compelling story with really great characters and the twist. It's better than even M. Night Shyamalan could do.
This story was less idea-driven than like Heinlein or Asimov or Campbell.
Yeah.
and more adventure.
Yes.
More adventurous.
Yes.
And it's one of the earlier stories. I mean, yeah, there are authors that did it in the 1930s, but they didn't write their stories quite as good as this. But Van Vogt took those and started going out and imagining these galactic civilizations. And you really, before science fiction of the 1930s and 1940s, you never had that. The best you had was some guy radio teleporting himself to Mars.
Yeah.
You didn't have stories about people going to other stars so much, or if they did, it was more mystical,
Yeah.
and they were, dreaming it, and it was in some other, mystical world or something, and they didn't take. It wasn't where they got in spaceships and went there on purpose.
Yes.
Here you have you for the first time the idea that would reach its epitome in Star Trek of man going out into the stars and exploring and pushing technology and really taking our civilization to the whole galaxy.
Yeah, and by this point, the story was kind of written where humans had only been involved in space travel or any kind of space exploration for only about 100 years. So we haven't really gotten far outside of our own solar system by this point, which was kind of a huge part of the story because it made it ideal for the vampires to kind of introduce themselves. They already look human enough because we're all part of the same galactic empire, so to speak. We're just the youngest planet with the youngest version of ourselves, so to speak. And I thought that was really cool how they kind of played into that, where it's like they kind of just let this genetic science project kind of go on its own. It was only 100 years into the biggest exploration they could possibly be involved in.
Yeah.
Before discovering that there might be a galactic empire kind of running the show, so to speak. And how much the galactic empire really was involved in Earth was interesting. It was just very covert. They still had people coming and checking in and, things like that to see the progress of what humans had done. But for the most part, it was just really interesting how they kind of play all of that together.
Yeah.
And how space travel was so young and yet so much older than where we're at right now.
Yeah.
So that was really fun.
So this story set the stage for the kind of novels you have today, like Adrian Tchaikovsky's Children of Time, or the novels of Ian Banks. Of course, those novels are way more detailed, their whole series and stuff, way more detailed than this story was. But this story was the beginning of that kind of science fiction. And the authors of that time, like Van Vogt, set the stage for what is being written today.
Yep.
So writers today have a big debt to pay to them.
Absolutely.
For showing the way. And I had another thought. Oh, the other thought I have is the issue of Astounding, where this story was published, I think it was August 42, is the same issue that Isaac Asimov published, Foundation.
Oh,
and
nice.
There were a couple of other very famous Golden Age science fiction stories published in this issue. Let's see, there was Foundation, Asylum, The Push of a Finger by Alfred Bester was all in one issue. And you'd have that in the 1940s with Astounding magazine. You'd have these single issues where these just incredibly landmark, groundbreaking science fiction stories were published. You'd have a bunch of them in one issue. You'll never see that again, because science fiction has been developed. But at this time it was still developing. All these themes were still just first being explored. And it was a really exciting time, and they had a lot of fun with it because, like I say, they didn't have any real commercial forces pushing them to do a certain type of thing. They could do what they wanted.
Yeah. It was just that twist blew me away. That's really all I can say without giving it away to people.
Yeah.
It's really good. If you like adventure sci-fi, this is a great short story. Novella, really. So it's a little bit longer than a short story, but like young people that you're trying to get involved in chapter books, I feel like would really enjoy this particular story.
Sure.
I feel like it's long enough, but still short enough. Like, if you're trying to get kids involved in chapter books, I feel like this is actually it's pretty tame, pretty clean. Kind of scary, but not so much that it's no more scary than probably a lot of the stuff they're seeing on television these days.
Yeah.
So I feel like this is a really good,
it's about 50 pages long, so
Yeah.
it's not so long that kids are going to go, oh, I'm never going to be able to finish that.
Yeah, but it's
You know?
segmented well where it kind of gets them into a good transition as they're starting to read what a chapter book is going to feel like, and just kind of,
Yeah.
it's a good transitional one.
And of course, at 50 pages, you can have a little more
Mhm.
character development and such.
Yeah, and it's a
So
great story.
It's not too short.
It's a great story when you need to introvert during Thanksgiving. Get away from the family for a hot minute.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was really good. I was blown away. I'm tempted to put this in as a top tale.
I would.
Okay, good, because yeah, it was really good.
Mm-hmm.
I-
Isaac Asimov would.
That was such an unexpected twist in there. I was just super impressed. So please read it. Read the twist. Please comment on the twist. Oh, the twist. All right, that's all I gotta say. We'll
That's
see you
all I
next
got.
time.
Bye.
Bye.